Okay, I'm going to program the simple generic ArrayList from the textbook. I think it's in chapter 5, chapter 4. It's on page 156 if you have a copy of the textbook. Yeah, I just think I'm doing this recording in the morning and I take a nutritional supplement first thing in the day, and afterwards I get a ton of energy, and then I think, well, I know everything. And then the rest of the day happens. So I can't believe how many times I'm doing that in the morning, and it feels great. Um, but I'm also teaching a fourth year class where we do a lot of logical reasoning while we think through doing a little bit of writing. So the students are writing essays, um, and it's always really surprising how everyone thinks through everything. I'm really enjoying that class a lot. I think knowing how to write natural language can actually help you be a better programmer too. So I actually have taken a creative writing class at UFE maybe about a year and a half ago, maybe about 2 years ago. And I really enjoyed it a lot. I think there's a lot of analogous concepts between communicating with other people and also describing how you would like a computer to execute. Okay, I'm not gonna spend the time in the video doing a lot of typing, so I'll pause and then we'll come back without the comments. Really, when you're looking at the example code that they're giving in the textbook, the comments are actually Javadoc, and you can use Javadoc to compile web pages that will describe your API for you. This is really useful. Maybe I should demonstrate this at some point in the semester just so you know that you can do that if you haven't been shown it before. Hopefully I'm not going to have any lag with my recording. We'll see. I connect my second display and it tends to want to have issues with the driver, I believe. So things kind of slow down a bit sometimes. Just a quick reminder from the last video yesterday, we had use of JDB, the Java debugger. Here's another setup if we wanted to have non-static getNum, and then if we want to use the getNum method, it means we have to call it from some instance of our class that exists. So we create one, and then you can call it. And I'm most interested in just going back to the debugger quickly to just demonstrate if we want to use it. So I've already got this one compiled. Remember, you want to use -g option .java and then JDB. I've already got the initialization file set up to have a breakpoint, so stop at app:6, and I'm just going to run it, and then we're going to do next because I want to actually create oh, I didn't specify which class I wanted to load first of all, so I have to specify it with the run command. Okay, now we'll do next and create the instance of our app, and then I'll do fields just to show you what we've got currently. We've got int j, and then we have locals, and we've got our app instance, so we can use it. If we want to just do an evaluation like I was trying to do in the last video, we can do it through the variable app that we've got that's local, and call getNum. And so it returns value too, it's being evaluated. Or you could do print if you want to just take a look at something as well. Okay, just to take it back to what we had before, so you can see the static setup that we had. I'm going to do remove the prefix. We'll make this method static again. So we could just call it from the main method, no problem, because now the method belongs to the class instead of any different instance we might create of the class. When we go back, I just pushed the arrow key up a couple times. I'm recompiling with debug option, and then run JDB again, and do run app, and then next. I've already created an app. I could actually remove that line on line 6. But now if we do eval, we should just be able to call the getNum method through the class itself. Now, I remember trying to do this yesterday, and for some reason it didn't want to evaluate. So you should be able to call methods that are static through the class like this, if you need to. Same with print. Just a quick reminder. So I'm going to exit out of this. We'll be playing around with Java Debugger more. If we go back to generic simple ArrayList, I've got the code ready to go. This is fitting on my entire screen, so this is all of it. There is the one adjustment that we need to make because of generics. We would want to use just the generic type T to store elements in an instance of this if I wanted it to manage elements of type T for me in an array. And this is giving an idea of how your array list might manage a growing array. If you wanted to add more elements to it, it would resize the array for you. Now the only other extra method I would need on top of that is, because there's no way around it, you have to have the application or whatever the client code is that knows what kind of type that it wants to work with. So to correctly initialize things, we would have to pass in what that constructor is. Remember, we're setting that up through the int function, that class for us. You'd have to call this in application code, so I'm going to be testing this out to make sure that we don't have any bugs, and that's the next part. I want to make sure that it's going to function correctly. So there could be a few more edits that we'll take care of for debugging, but ultimately, in the end, what we're going to want the code to do is, of the type that we're interested in, we want it to create an array of approximately double the size plus 1. And then we'll copy over the old items to the new array, and then add the new element that we want. There's the plus 1. And then return that this was successful. Now, I'd imagine if you want to take care of a lot more code just to check everything, because there can be issues where you might try to double the size of the array, and if it's a very large array and the operating system says, no, there's no more memory for this program, we're not going to give it to the program. And the program's like, well, I can't create a new array that's twice the size because it's too big. Then you'd have to have other code to try to deal with those kind of situations. So there's different cases you would want to deal with. We're not going to get into the details of that because we're just doing the basics here. And the next thing I would want to do is start editing my application and make use of one of these. So we've got a generic simple array list. Let's swap this out for creating one of those. And we'll do, I guess, our values. We'll do a new generic simple array. And if you haven't created some other class that's managing instances of your data, then you can always begin with capital I integer as the wrapper class for integers. So we'll have our collection manage integers for us just to get started really quick with it. I'm going to get rid of the rest of this code here, and this method as well. Okay, and for our values, we've got an add method. We can add, and because we've got capital I integer, it's okay if we pass in just a regular literal. It should wrap it accordingly. If we've got further issues, we'll deal with them when we get there. I'll just start off, I think, actually with passing in the value 0. And we'll see how it handles the first 3 integers in that order to see if it matches and how we do. I don't think we had anything to print our array list, so that's a method we're going to have to add in addition to what the textbook had. But that's not too bad. If we go through and we say public void print, the best way to deal with this would be if we were creating our own class to override the toString method. That way, when we go to print, we're just passing in the elements to system.out.print. So we'll have a loop. Less than the size. So I do have a little bit of lag there. And we'll do system.out.print. And we'll have it do the items I. So each one at a time, but we'll concatenate it with a space between them. Now, depending on how toString might be overrided, there could be a bunch of output, so it might not necessarily be the way you want the output to show up is all jammed together on one line. And the output for the override of toString might even be printing on multiple lines itself. You know, if there's \n for the escape character to have your output move to the next line. There might be things like that going on. I'm going to do system.out.println at the end just to move our output to the next line. And you might not even want that. You might want to just leave this last output to move to the next line. You might want to even only have that done in your main application, depending on how you want things to behave. So you got to keep those little issues in mind, depending on the kind of output you're designing. Let's see, if we do values.print now, we'll see what we would get for our program. Of course, we're going to have to do maybe a little bit of debugging every time we go through the next step. And we'll do Java C. And I'm not going to debug this because I'm just doing some basic checking here. So I'm not going to use JDB at the moment. I'll do Java, and I'm going to do app.java as well. So it's complaining that we cannot find symbol. I probably have a misspelling for it. Oh, I missed off the word list on the end. Here we go. Okay, some unchecked or unsafe operations. Now, I did not have that kind of warning when I was using cons like this before. And I have not set the type either in my app. So before I go to use add, it has to know how to construct things. So we'll do values, set type, and we've got integer array. We'll see if we'll get some complaints about that, and then I'll probably have to spend quite a bit of time debugging. I'll definitely pause the video in that case. Oh, let's see the options, what it might be complaining about for excellent unchecked. So I'll do Java C. Well, I'll push arrow key up, and then we'll go back and add the option here between excellent unchecked. So what am I doing that should be checked? So there could be issues when I'm going to, as a member of the raw type generic simple array list. Oh, I didn't set the type, that's why. Integer. Hopefully that should fix the issue. Yeah, so we're good. We definitely want to make sure to take care of any kind of warnings as well as errors, because we do want to have good code. You want to also have good style, and sometimes the warnings, you could add extra compiler options if you really wanted to be like A++, then there are compiler options where you might be more concerned with extra warnings. I know you can do that with languages like C and C++. I actually haven't looked into that issue with the Java compiler. And let's take a look at how we're going to run now. So if we go to run app, let's see our output. We've got an exception for null pointer exception on line generic simple array list on line 24. For the items, when we go to add, for the size, the items, we don't actually have one created yet before we even go to have the constructor. So these are the kind of issues that you'd run into if you're trying to do practice, that you're just going off the textbook example code. So I'm quickly going to create a default constructor, so that way when you start up, you at least have an array of the type you need with one element in it so that you can start adding things to it. Okay, I think I've got something that would just be bare bones default constructor, at least as close as you could get to just creating an instance of your container that's got nothing inside of it. We would at the very least need to describe what the type is. I guess this way we could then make things a little bit better designed here, so we're not exposing some method we could call where we might even change the type from the client code. So I would change this to private, and I wouldn't call it, and instead we would be passing in one of which constructor we're interested in when we go to make one, which makes more sense to me. The only other little bit of code we would have to add would be to check whether our collection doesn't have anything in it, because in that case we can't turn around and double the size. Well, I guess we could. If that was 0, we've got +1. Actually, I think I can get away with not even having to adjust the code like that. We don't have old items though. I guess that's where we would have the error if we did do that code. So yeah, we gotta keep it. Okay, I think I've thought through everything. In my app then, I'm not setting the type. Instead, we're passing with constructor when we go to create one. The constructor type. Let's see. I'll take care of any more errors in a minute. Let's do a test. And we have our list. It's got 0 on 2. Now we should also be able to create another one and have it be some other type. Let's do string words maybe. New simple array list string. We'll do string array. See words. We'll add hello, the typical hello world. And then we'll do words print. You can see how clean the client code is, you know, minus the really long name for a container. But of course, in the Java API, you just have ArrayList, and you use that. And they've got much nicer design where you don't have to pass in the constructor for your type in order to have it manage the instances for you that you add to it. So we're getting closer to some nicer stuff. And there we go. We've got container. We can manage working with generic types. We can start organizing our code as well as our data much more nicely. Which is really the point of all of this. We want to be able to have not only object-oriented code, but we want it to be organized in a way so when we go to use these containers and collections, that the rest of our code is also really nicely organized. I'm going to stop the video here. I'll probably do maybe another short video today. I want to get into things like linked list, and then eventually we'll get to trees. And I would think if we're at this point now, I'd probably even make some extra videos where it's not required for you to watch, but I want to make a video game, and we could do it with Java. And when you learn data structure and algorithms, it's so much easier to start getting into making some kind of game that you might want that would actually be fun. So we'll see how things go. I've got a lot of reading I'm probably going to have to do during the break, but I'm sure I can have, you know, at least a few small videos getting started on something interesting like that.